Today's episode of the Multiversity Coffee Break is brought to you by Comixology. Immerse yourself in over 20,000 digital comic books, graphic novels, and manga titles from over 125 publishers with Comixology. Our first-in-class, exclusive guide of view technology provides an unparalleled, immersive, and cinematic reading experience for readers. Purchase a la carte titles or start a monthly unlimited account to save 15% on select publishers. Still not sold? Try an unlimited subscription free for 30 days and see why thousands of readers trust Comixology for both classic and new releases from DC, Image, Marvel, and more. Enjoy your coffee break.
All right, cool. Hi, viewers.
Well,
Hi, folks at home, if there's any of them. I don't know if there are.
there are people, and there will be more as this goes on, I'm sure.
Wild.
So anyway, welcome to the Multiversity Coffee Break. I am drinking coffee out of the mug my daughter painted for me. It's lovely.
It's very pretty. How old's your daughter?
She's 8.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I have an 8-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son, and they are fun, but they are out of this general vicinity right now, which is lovely. I love them, but it's lovely. We have Magdalene Visaggio. Hello, how are you, Mags?
I'm good.
We're getting the full experience. I love it.
Yeah, I'm a huge stoner. It's a problem.
Where are you located? Should we not say where you're located based on legality of certain substances?
It's not a secret where I'm located.
Okay.
And it's been decriminalized.
Okay. So
here in New York City. So,
okay.
And they have no evidence for what that was. I could have been smoking tobacco.
I know it was tobacco, to be honest with you.
It was tobacco. That's what it said at the store where I purchased it.
Exactly.
For tobacco. No. So I'm good. I'm a little hyped up. I've been up since like 7 a.m.
Okay.
I've been like waking up. So that's super early for me in the pandemic world where I don't have to be, up 2 hours early to get to my job in Brooklyn anymore. And lately I just I can't sleep later than that. It's killing me.
I'm 38, and when I turned I guess it was 30 or 31, my ability to sleep late just disappeared, just went away.
Yeah, this just happened in the last couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So
I don't know why these things happen, but
I don't either. Neither does my psych provider, who has been working with me a lot on getting my sleep in order because it was super screwed up earlier this year too. So whatever.
Mine has been really suffering this year too, but I don't know how much of that is pandemic related or just old related or whatever.
I'm pretty good at compartmentalizing, so I do my best not to think about the pandemic, and my best is really good.
Okay.
And it's also kind of easy to not think about it here because in NYC we have the lowest infection rate in the country right now. So it's not like it was earlier in the year when it was like a tomb out these windows.
Yeah.
Like it was like April and I guess March and April and into May were terrifying up here in a way that I have a really hard time describing. It's like talk to New Yorkers and it's like this is worse emotionally than 9/11 that was 20 years ago. I can't say that for sure because I wasn't here for 9/11. I was living in Virginia, but
yeah, I mean, I'm in New Jersey, about 30 miles from you, and but my wife works in a nursing home, and she was in a nursing home that was very highly infected.
Oh, then you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
when things were just absolutely bleak. It was bleak and apocalyptic outside.
Yeah, so I feel the same way you do, which is it's easy to forget what's happening until you have to go to the supermarket or turn on the news or whatever, or go on Twitter, and then
I just don't turn on the news, and I try to stay off Twitter really much past noon. I try to be off Twitter and then just kind of stay off social media. I'm not good at it, but I'm doing better.
That's probably a healthy attitude to have.
Twitter's a nightmare.
But yes, it is. But we're not here to talk about Twitter. So for this series, I'm asking everybody, what do you want to talk about? And the first thing Mag said was, Star Trek.
Because I love Star Trek. It's the most important thing in the world to me, other than my wonderful fiance, who is currently just behind the camera.
Okay.
He blew me a kiss. Hi, babe.
So I have very limited Star Trek knowledge. My two most formative Star Trek memories were my dad was looking through the newspaper and said, "Let's go see a movie. What do you want to see?" And I said, "Ooh, I love Star Trek." And he goes, "No, you love Star Wars." I'm like, "No, I love Star Trek, Dad." He's like, "No, you love Star Wars." I'm like, "No, Dad, I love Star Trek." So my dad took me to see Star Trek 4, and I was very bored by it because I had never seen a Star Trek movie before. I was 5 years old, I think.
Okay, that's fair.
It's,
That's fair. That's fair.
Wales and San Francisco.
Funny.
Well, today maybe, but what year was that? 80.
86.
Yeah, I was 4 years old, so I think the nuance of Star Trek 4 is probably lost on a 4-year-old.
That's fair.
And then when I was in fourth grade, a new kid moved to town. We quickly became best friends, and he was really into Star Trek. So he would sometimes subject me to original series episodes on VHS in his mom's basement.
I'm sorry, did you just say subject?
Well, again, not today.
I'm just messing with.
I know.
I'm just being punchy.
I know. 10-year-old Brian.
Comedic effect. Odd.
10-year-old Brian was not super into the Borg, but I have to say, I think that Star Trek is a fascinating franchise and a fascinating fandom. So how did you get into Star Trek initially?
I'm actually not entirely sure. I remember when I'm having a hard time even figuring out how old I was at the time. I can't have been older than 8. My friend David was kind of into Star Trek. Not like super into Star Trek, but he was kind of into it. And his dad was really into it. David was really into James Bond, which I never got into. I've never understood the appeal. But I don't know. I don't know what it was. I don't remember being exposed to it. I'm pretty sure I remember getting into it through David because I remember as a kid thinking that it was funny that I was way more into it than he was.
Okay.
but I don't really know. It's not like with comics where I can identify the moment.
Right.
Which is my dad brought me a couple of issues of Superman when I was like 7. And with Star Trek, it's much harder to pin down. Star Trek, I feel like I have this really almost primeval connection to. It's always been there.
Sure. What is your Trek like?
Oh, Deep Space Nine.
Okay, is that when you came into it, or did you come?
No, actually. So, I mean, actually, yes and no. It's weird because when I got into Star Trek, TNG was already in syndication, in rerun syndication. And so my primary experience with Star Trek was Star Trek The Next Generation. DS9 is something I saw here and there for its first few seasons. And mostly my Star Trek consumption was The Next Generation reruns on our local Fox affiliate. They would air Star Trek between 5 and 7, and it was great. And so I got into TNG. I didn't get into TOS because that came on when I was at school. It just wasn't a presence during those formative years. There was nothing I could do to watch it.
And that's back. I think that kids today, kids today don't recognize how hard it was to watch things that you didn't.
It was really, really difficult. I remember the reason I never got really into anime is just because my family was incredibly poor, and anime DVDs were insane. Mm-hmm. FLCL was $90.
Wow.
For 6 episodes. And you had to make sure you could actually even play that stuff. Going to Suncoast was always just really maddeningly disappointing because I couldn't afford anything.
Yeah, no, and also, there weren't a lot of shows that were released in completion on home video. So even if you could get a best of a certain show, you weren't getting the full experience. You were getting.
Yeah, and so I had TOS VHS tape that had 3 episodes on it. I don't even remember what they were. And I had a few scattered episodes of TNG on tape that I would watch like over and over again. I've seen Counter at Farpoint, the series premiere of TNG, so many times. It's not a good 2 hours of television. It's a bad pilot for a not promising show. Like, wow. um, DS9 was something that I started getting into in late elementary school and middle school. I got really, really like that just became like my thing because it came on at Saturdays at 6 p.m., which is just tells you the level of confidence Fox had in its ability to draw ratings. But it came on at the tail end of like on Saturday they also had like Hercules: The Legendary Journeys and Highlander the series and all those like syndicated like sci-fi and action shows. That was always that block of time where they aired and I guess that was like anchored right on the edge of prime time by DS9. And I couldn't tell you why DS9 clicked with me as a kid. I just really fell in love. Sorry?
How old were you when that started?
Well, DS9 premiered in 92, but I think I saw one of the first few episodes around the time it aired. And then I didn't see it again until like season 3.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't really know what happened. But when I got back into it, I got back into it really hard. And I fell absolutely just in love with these characters. And I guess what it was for me, I never experienced serialized television quite like this. I had to a degree on something like Gargoyles.
Mm-hmm.
But Gargoyles is, relatively speaking, a pretty short show.
Yeah.
To have the opportunity to like spend time with these characters over years and they would grow and change and their relationships would change and the status quo would change. It was revolutionary to me at the time as like a child.
Mm-hmm.
It was such that I I had we couldn't when I was in my first year of high school was when the show ended and we didn't actually even we didn't even get it where I was living at the time for that year. And so my uncle was taping them and sending me the tapes. And the series finale I had and just never watched because I was too emotionally like not ready.
Yeah.
And so I didn't see the series finale of my favorite Star Trek show by my own choice for 6 years before I finally watched it. I caught it on Spike TV one day.
Did it live up to all that hype?
It's magnificent. I cry watching it to this day. I cry. I won't say it's the perfect series finale because what they try to do the thing where they wrap up everything in this one episode. And they do a really good job of most of it. Like wrapping up the characters' emotional arcs is done just beautifully. Wrapping up the Dominion War is actually on the tail end of a multi-episode arc. So like they finish up this multi-episode arc, finishing up the war, giving us our catharsis, let us say goodbye to people. And then Captain Sisko leaves and goes and does some special effects magic fighting in an obvious cave set. And it works, but it's not great.
Understood.
But that leads then into an absolutely just amazing beat, which is Ben Sisko's saying goodbye. And then like the movie just wrapped the finale wraps up like everything beautifully well, except for like the central arc of the show, which was Ben Sisko as the emissary of the prophets and what that meant. It just feels like they kind of shoehorned that into the last half hour.
Sure. Now,
I would have liked an episode to deal with that where they had some money.
Right.
But they spent all their money on I just can't believe I just know the name of this. The Second Battle of Chintaka.
Well, we're going to take a break from track for 1 minute. We have some questions on Twitch for you.
Oh, cool. Hi, Twitch.
So somebody asked, had there been a Vagrant Queen season 2 television-wise, what would we have seen?
I'm not actually really sure. I was not very involved in the show. I was sort of kept in the loop by the team. I was in pretty regular contact with the director, and I'm some good friends with her. I'm pretty good friends with Mariko Tamaki, who was also writing the show. Um, I got to be pretty tight with Tim Rosen, but like that was kind of it. Like if I had a question that they were allowed to answer, they'd answer it. You know, and I could offer my thoughts on things, but they didn't like follow them because like that was, and that's cool because that was Jem's show, and pardon, and Jem, I think did a really magnificent job. I loved that show. That was such a fun experience. But so basically, all I know is a little bit of what is already public about a second season, which was that they were probably going to pursue Alita's mom to Earth to save it from being conquered by her, which she was clearly about to do. And they were clearly setting up a new character in the last couple of episodes.
Okay.
But I didn't really. I don't really know what they were going to do with her, although I thought she was great.
And then the other question we got so far is, any plans to bring back Kim and Kim for more adventures?
Yeah, it's something we're trying to do. That's a situation that got really complicated in 2018, due to I guess a lot of bad communication from the publisher. I'm not trying to. It's not a secret that I've had my issues with Black Mask over the last few years, but that's something we are all sort of like I think we've found like a good working relationship.
Okay.
And bringing back Kim and Kim is a priority. It's just a question of doing it in a way that I think will succeed.
Okay.
I think one of the big things that really hobbled Kim and Kim over the years was sort of an inconsistent release schedule. I often found out books were on shelves after they were on shelves by a matter of days. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't learn it. Like the release schedule was very erratic. There were administrative problems.
I see that from the press side. You know, there will be 6 months without an email from certain publishers, and then all of a sudden you get one email with like 9 months worth of review copies in there, and that's no good to anybody. You know.
Yeah, that's no good to anybody. And Kim and Kim definitely took a hit from that. So we've been working on a plan to get Kim and Kim back out there with effective support. I put the book on hiatus because I was not confident we were going to get that for a while, and I didn't feel like I could continue to put out the book when it wasn't being managed in a way that made it financially viable. Mm-hmm. Like we went from selling 20,000 copies of our very first issue to the final issue of Oh Shit, It's Kim and Kim, which was supposed to be an ongoing before I put it on hiatus. Selling maybe a 1,500.
Wow.
And like that's a steep decline, and it didn't happen because of the book. You know, like it just became it was impossible for me to communicate with my readers about what was going on with the book and when things would be released. I still have people, I guess not anymore because conventions aren't a thing, but I would still, as of last year, have people come up to me and they'd be surprised that there was a third volume. Sometimes they didn't know there was anything past the first book because they didn't get the book into bookstores, which is where the audience for the book is. It's a non-traditional audience, which means it's not going to thrive in comic shops the way that a more traditional book would. And there wasn't really a cohesive plan getting it in shops. I mean, in bookstores and in front of like book market reviews and like getting it in front of the press that would be interested in it. Sure. And the commercial channels that would be able to handle it. And so that was really frustrating, but I'm very confident. It still has to happen, but we do have a a plan and action to get the book to a place administratively where I think we can continue to, or I guess we can resume putting it back out with necessary protections for everyone on the team. And just really clarifying our relationship with Black Mask a lot. It's been, I think, it's been a painful process, one that I think is going to be really healthy.
That's good. This is not a question, just a comment, and this comes from me. Eternity Girl, the best.
Yep.
One of my favorite comics of the last 5 or so years. And
it's a really high honor because there's been some incredible work in that time.
Yeah, but everything about it just was clicked for me in really, like, it felt simultaneously totally original, and it reminded me of comics I loved from my childhood. So it was this really just rewarding experience. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. That was an absolute joy is the wrong word. You've read the book. Let's say it was a joy to work on, but it was really interesting to work on. What was really cool about bringing in Sunny is that it's like we spent months trying to cast the artist on that book, and nothing was clicking. And then suddenly I remembered Sunny and how much I had loved his work on Dr. Fate. That's a great book. Such a great book. So many issues devoted to one night. I've just magic. And I was like, I really have a sense that he's got the right kind of like craggy art style. Like it's not an easy art style, but it's a really versatile one that does a lot of interesting things. But he's got the right level of cragginess and just understanding of the comic page to tackle the extremely complicated visuals I was desperately trying to describe. It ended up being just like a real match made in heaven. He elevated my pages and made them better than what I was writing, which is the goal always. But it was just it was so seamless. Like he would do this thing where I write full script. I don't like writing plot style. I find it just maddening. I like having control over my pacing, my presentation, over my moments, over giving a really specific kind of experience. And Sunny disregarded a lot of my pages in terms of here's how I'm solving the events of this page, what this page has to do, and come up with something that was just fascinatingly innovative. He really uses what I think is the most interesting part of the comics page, which is the way that it turns time into a function of space in really interesting ways that worked to heighten the disorientation that I wanted the reader to have. But then if you go back and reread it, you can navigate through it because now you kind of have the key to it. I've never gotten to do a work that kind of experimental, and that was like the first time I'd really had the opportunity to do something that complicated and thinky on a professional level. I always used to want to do big, weird conceptual projects like that. That's my shit. But I made a really conscious decision when I got really serious about comics to step back from that and focus on meat and potatoes storytelling because I was not competent enough at that point to do that kind of work. So that's when I ended up doing Andrew Jackson's Face. I did a bunch of short comics. And Kim and Kim was sort of the culmination of that, the apotheosis of that process, and me trying to break down so many of my bad writing habits, my counterproductive writing habits, especially my tendency to overthink things. And so I was like, okay, if I'm going to do conceptual stuff, I'm probably going to end up overthinking it and falling right back into those traps of doing really plotting, expository, boring stuff that's so focused on the ideas that it's trying to present that it's losing a personal and emotional experience. So, I made this really conscious decision with Kim and Kim. I mean, like culminating Kim and Kim and kept that going for a little bit to really focus on little stories with well-defined characters, loose plots, and tons of action and fun. And so I kind of like built my brand on that, which was interesting because that was never the kind of work I really set out to do, but I really just fell in love with it. I love doing that work.
Awesome.
But I still really had that hunger to do something super complicated. And so that was just an incredibly rewarding and interesting experience. And DC had my back on it in a way that like I expected so much more pushback on the weird shit I wanted to do. Expected so much more, and they were just like, you're in charge of this. Make the book you want to make.
That's awesome.
It's so rare to have the opportunity to do that at a company like DC.
Absolutely. We have another question from Twitch, and this is a Trek. Hey. This is a Trek-related question. So it says, Picard and the Borg have or will have had their own comic miniseries. Which Star Trek character that hasn't had their own comic series do you think deserves one?
Say again? Do I think deserves one?
What Trek character deserves a miniseries or an ongoing?
Okay, I'm gonna dump my hottest take. This is my hottest Trek take. I kind of love Wesley Crusher.
That means nothing to me. Tell our audience who that is.
Okay, so Wesley Crusher, for non-Trek people in the viewing audience, is widely regarded as one of the worst characters in Star Trek. He's introduced in The Next Generation, and he's kind of this irritating boy genius who just solves problems that these experienced professionals can't solve, just undercutting them. He just seemed to be way better than them at everything, but in a way that didn't make him look smart, but made them look stupid. You know?
Yeah.
But I'm really fascinated by Wesley Crusher because his arc over the course of the series is really interesting, and it's never what you would expect it to be. Or I should say, it doesn't really end up being what you'd expect it to be. Like, so Wesley Crusher is the is the son of Dr. Beverly Crusher, the chief medical officer. His dad was a Starfleet officer who died before he was born. And he spends the whole series like gearing up to go into Starfleet. But at the same time, there's this whole other element to him where he's supposed to be like the Mozart of mathematics and physics. He's supposed to be this guy with this really weird potential to interact with the universe in a way nobody or almost nobody else can, where his relationship to time and space, because of what he can do in his mind, is supposed to be different. But no, he just wants to throw on, like, there's a whole episode about that really early on, about his abilities and what this weird guy called the Traveler like sees in him, you know, like what his great destiny could be. But then the writers kind of forget all about that, more or less, and send him off into Starfleet Academy. And it's like all he wants to do is put on the uniform, which is all anybody in Star Trek seems to want to do, is put on the uniform, which is so weird to me. It's so weird to me. But Wesley, over the course of the show, like, they kind of start to like poke at maybe this isn't his thing. There's an episode called The First Duty where he is involved in an accident that kills another cadet, and he aids in a cover-up that gets him basically held back. They void all his credits for the entire academic year, and he has to repeat it. You just get this sense that like Starfleet isn't really something he finds satisfying. And so toward the very end of the show, they do this episode called Journey's End, which is all about connecting Wesley with his potential and not with what we all assumed his life would be. And so it has him leaving Starfleet Academy and going off with the Traveler to explore the limits of his mind and the universe and physics and mathematics and matter and energy and thought. And we've never followed up on that. There's nothing about what happens after that. He had a very brief cameo in Star Trek Nemesis, and he's back in a Starfleet uniform. And that tells me that the writers of Nemesis just kind of forgot or didn't care. But I think that like that undercuts his character and the journey that he goes on over the course of that show. I've always wanted to follow up with Wesley because I think what you have with doing a story focused on Wesley is an opportunity to really embrace the entire legacy and history of Star Trek, to its past and to its future and to alternate realities with this guy who can go anywhere and kind of do anything. I want to do Star Trek Doctor Who with the Traveler, with Wesley Crusher as the new Traveler, as someone who is really exploring his legacy and his connection to his world, instead of just serving on a starship. I want to do a Star Trek show that isn't in any way, shape, or form about Starfleet.
I hope the folks at IDW are listening to this so that they can.
I've been trying to pitch IDW on a Star Trek thing for ages. I was up for a Voyager miniseries a while ago, and then there was all these like licensing changes at IDW and at CBS Paramount as like Star Trek's ownership shifted, and they were reorganizing things, and my Voyager miniseries, which I'm so proud of, ended up on the cutting room floor.
I'm sorry.
And that was another thing where it's like I wanted to do something about what's the potential of the story that they gave us that they didn't explore. And so I wanted to do a Voyager story that was just about, well, how else could being stranded in the Delta Quadrant have gone? And what happens if those two versions of things were to meet up?
Now, here's a question, which I think is a controversial one in Star Trek circles. What are your thoughts on the J.J. Abrams films?
Mixed. I actually really like the 2009 Star Trek and Star Trek Beyond from 2016. I think they were both fantastic for different reasons. They got a lot of shit because people were, especially the first one, because it's like Star Trek's not an action movie, and I'm like, go back and watch all the original movies, and they're all genre riffs. Yep. They're all attempting to make something that isn't an episode of Star Trek, because it's not an episode of Star Trek. It's a movie, so they're going after different kinds of experiences, things that they wouldn't necessarily be able to do in their television format. So Star Trek I could rattle these off. Star Trek the Motion Picture, I'll do the ones that come to the top of my head, is 2001: A Space Odyssey. Star Trek First Contact is Alien. Star Trek The Voyage Home is Fish Out of Water, comedy. Star Trek 6 is a Cold War political thriller. Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, it's a submarine movie. It's just Das Boot. That's all it is. It's Das Boot. That's what they set out to make. And none of them are like explorations of ideas that Star Trek is so famous for, with the exception of what is widely regarded as one of the worst Star Trek movies. And that's Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, which I like, because that was one of my earliest exposures to Star Trek, and I think it's just such a charming and earnest movie. Yeah, William Shatner thinks I'm a piece of shit, but I like his one Star Trek movie. So
why does
he said something transphobic, and I said it was transphobic, and he was pissed at me for it.
He can get over it.
No, yeah, he can get over it. I'm gonna get over it. Star Trek means too much to me to let William Shatner being a dick to me sour it. He doesn't even physically look like Captain Kirk anymore, so I can make that connection.
Fair enough.
But what I thought Beyond was the purest expression of like an episode of Star Trek onto the big screen in a way that has never been done, where it felt both limited in its scope but also huge in its ambition. Like it was telling a smaller story that was also a bigger story. Instead of just like moving through all these like different kinds of movies they could make. I think that Into Darkness is wretched. I think it's borderline unwatchable. I hate that movie even more every time I see it. I went into that movie the most generous possible viewer. Like, I don't go into Star Trek movies looking to criticize them. I go looking to enjoy them. I go in there, I want to have fun. I have defended terrible movies because at the time in the theater, I wasn't going to be critical. You know,
Right.
I was just going to enjoy it and take from it what I could. And I walked out of that movie just like, that wasn't good, was it? Um, and I have my Trek nitpicky reasons for doing it. Like, there's a lot of ways in which, I mean, the Abrams movies overall don't seem to really get what exactly Starfleet is. They make some just glaring errors about that, where they're like, do you know what the Federation is? It's a peacekeeping armada. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's a political union. It's a federation of member states. You know, Starfleet's just one arm of that. The way they misuse technology, like the transporter, but honestly, all of that stuff, I can forgive. I can forgive technicalness if it wasn't for the fact that it was an incoherent movie that um, didn't even use what was supposed to be its biggest secret well. Like, all right, so we all knew Benedict Cumberbatch was going to be Khan. We all knew going into that movie. And then they treat it like it's a big reveal and then immediately undercut it because the characters have no clue who Khan is. And so then they have to go ask Spock Prime who Khan is, and he doesn't even tell them. So if you're a new Star Trek fan who hasn't seen the movie that this is brazenly ripping off, you don't even understand the emotional context of what's going on.
Yeah.
And its attempts to parallel it are undercut at every turn. Like if you're gonna quote a movie, which I'm cool with, I love references, I love riffs, I'm all about playing within a tradition. And I think there's a version of Star Trek Into Darkness that could have ruled, but it's not the version they made. Because if they wanted to do something that was a riff on Star Trek 2, which is a movie about revenge and a deeply personal vendetta, doing a movie where Khan has none of those things and then trying to pretend like it's a revenge movie just by moving the target of his revenge to a character who we don't know and don't care about and who is unambiguously the villain, then it's like, who are we rooting for? I don't even understand who I'm supposed to be on the side of in this movie in a lot of ways. Even beyond that, there's this moment where Kirk is paralleling Spock's sacrifice in The Wrath of Khan. And I had this moment where I was like, oh my God, they're really doing this. This is so cool. I was like, are they really doing this? Because that moment actually felt kind of earned. And then I suddenly remembered, oh, but they have magic blood, so it doesn't matter. So there aren't consequences going into this. I didn't go into that scene thinking this would matter. Like when they killed Spock, that wasn't like a cheap trick. That was an attempt to get Leonard Nimoy in the movie. Mm-hmm. Leonard Nimoy only agreed to do Star Trek 2 if they would kill him off. That's how they got him. That's how they hooked him. Nick Meyer went up to him, or maybe it was Harv Bennett, went up to him at a party and said, how about if we give you a really cool death scene? Then we'll never call you again. And he was like, awesome. That sounds great. And it was a combination of two. So when they killed Spock, they killed Spock. Like, as far as the production team was concerned, Spock was dead. As far as the writers were concerned, Spock was dead. His funeral has a sense of finality to it because Spock is dead. The only reason they undercut that is two reasons. One, Nimoy really liked the experience of making this movie, and he was open to coming back and doing more. So they're like, okay, fuck, so we should open that door. And two, the audience reaction was, like, for the test audiences, was funereal. They weren't walking out like they'd enjoyed the movie. They were walking out like they just left a funeral. Like Spock had been taken from them, and they were feeling that. And so the combination of those two things meant that, okay, we're just going to leave a vague open door. But in Star Trek Into Darkness, we know going into that scene that Khan's blood can bring people back to life. So it doesn't matter, because that's where this is going. It wasn't a twist. It wasn't a reveal. They took what was shaping up to be actually genuinely powerful emotional moment and taken it away by reminding us it had no stakes.
Right.
So like I can forgive so much of like they didn't get Star Trek perfect, because fine, whatever. It's as long as it feels right. There's so much I'm willing to forgive. I really try not to be nitpicky, especially with Star Trek, which I get super nitpicky about. Like I have thoughts on just the history of Starfleet uniforms. I did a really epic thread kind of working out, all right, here's what I think is a timeline that makes all of this make sense. Because that was fun for me. I'm willing to do that work, is what I'm saying.
My friend from fourth grade, I asked him the other night, like, what was it that attracted you to Star Trek initially? And he said it was Star Wars for kids who like to alphabetize things. And I feel like that's a pretty good description of Star Trek.
I've always thought of it as Star Trek is just about something different.
Oh, totally, yeah.
That like it's not. I don't really see much of a meaningful parallel to Star Wars. Like I get where he's coming from with that, but it's not Star Wars for you like to alphabetize things, because it's not Star Wars. Like right. It doesn't. In really fundamental ways, Star Wars is aristocratic. Star Wars is mythological. Star Wars is mystical. Star Wars is religious. Star Wars is dynastic. Star Wars is, because of it, obviously in its name, has an obvious focus on combat. It's not about complicated issues, it's about clear issues, very simple issues. And that's not a knock against Star Wars at all. I love Star Wars for its I guess it's almost obvious sense of moral clarity. There's a real cause for that, and when they do it well, they do it well. And Star Trek never been about any of that. What I liked about Star Trek was that Star Trek felt like a world I could discover and understand and perhaps one day live in. Like it felt like especially the Next Generation, growing up as a kid in the 90s, the Next Generation is just in the future. The future is just in the 90s forever. It's the early to mid 90s forever. The Cold War is over. We're doing great. There aren't really any threats. We're just going to keep on expanding and growing and bringing in like this more and more people into this like post Cold War democratic world order. And so I dovetailed with that world, that's sort of like I guess the liberal dream, I clicked with that in a really big way, because that was the America that I was told I lived in. Right. That was the future that I already expected. And so Star Trek was like this future, It felt like a place where there was like a world that could exist, where there was room for people like me, for just like weirdos, because nobody had superpowers, but people did have, glasses. People were bold, people were, but ultimately people were principled, and everyone was treated like they were doing their best, and even if they failed, that was okay. Like it's a show that recognizes the kindness that we owe each other. And I wasn't a happy kid, so that was really cool to me, and I really clicked with especially the characters on DS9 and TNG as like family. Star Wars always felt distant, like it was legend.
Okay, I can see that.
I had a harder time emotionally engaging with that. Part of the reason I just never really got into fantasy is fantasy just didn't feel connected to reality in a way that I could click with.
I understand that. So for someone like me who is a neophyte with Trek, where would you suggest someone starts?
The original series, The City on the Edge of Forever. I'm really going to try to do like essential episodes that really just say something special about Star Trek of every series. So Enterprise, Twilight, or no, First Flight. Enterprise would be First Flight. The original series would be City on the Edge of Forever. Next Generation would actually probably be Darmok, although there's so many great contenders in that series. DS9 is a little tricky, but I'm gonna say this is such an out of left field answer, but it's an episode called "It's Only a Paper Moon," which is just about dealing with a traumatic experience, and it centers on a minor recurring character who loses his leg in battle and has to deal with that, coping with that. I think it's just a beautiful hour of television. Voyager, Blink of an Eye, which is about a planet that moves in time, that moves much faster in time than the rest of the universe. And so the few hours that Voyager's been in its orbit have been their entire history. And their culture has been inextricably tied up and affected by it. And it's about the planet's relationship with Voyager and Voyager's growing horror at what they've done. It's just such a great Prime Directive episode. I think that's absolutely just unmissable. I can't do it on the more recent shows. They're just way less episodic. But I guess I would say Magic to Drive The Most Sane Men Mad from Discovery's first season, which is a great Harry Mudd episode. It's with Rainn Wilson, the guy from The Trouble with Tribbles. Yeah, I think those are all episodes that are in some way, one way or another, really encapsulate what Star Trek is.
Okay.
And are just fabulous hours of television. City on the Edge of Forever is it's so good.
Somebody from Twitch has suggested that from Voyager, Tom Paris's evil twin needs their own comic.
Oh fuck! I love Tom Paris's evil twin. That would be fantastic. I'd also like to do one about the children that he had with Captain Janeway when they had both been briefly turned into amphibians. What happened to them?
And then before I let you go, just tell the folks out there what you're working on, what's coming out. I know you have a Ginny Hex.
Yeah, so this has been a light year for me release-wise, but I've been chugging along at a lot of longer form projects. I've really been pivoting over to the graphic novel space. I think that's just a more natural fit for the kind of stories I want to do. So it's hard to recommend stuff that's coming out or will come out soon, or that I can even talk about at this moment, because a lot of it's just caught up in things that I can't. That said, I'm sorry for talking so fast. My Ginny Hex book has been such a long time coming, and I'm so excited about it. It's the first time I've ever really had the opportunity to be additive to a character, to really contribute something instead of just making sure it reverts to status quo because I can't get in the way of the main book. And so that's like kind of me firing on all cylinders. It's 38 pages. If it does well, DC's not uninterested in more. She's a really popular character that people are responding to in a big way. And I got to really do some interesting work in building out her history and her family in ways that's going to be really definitive for the character going forward. And I've never gotten to do that before. It was really exciting. I'm also, I don't know if I can even say what specific bit of it I'm working on, but I have a bit in Death Metal, War of the Multiverses, which was also just a dream come true. I got to work on a huge tentpole character in a pretty visible spot and a pretty visible event, and so that was really fun. And I'm just hoping people enjoy it. It's a character I really love reading.
Very cool.
Other than that, I'm not sure the publishing schedule. I was supposed to have a big graphic novel dropping in the spring of next year, but I'm not we're behind on art for that, so I'm not sure the release schedule on that one.
Okay.
But yeah, that's where everything is.
Where
That's
can folks find you on the internet?
Twitter at magsvisags. I'm also at magsvisaggio.com.
Well, hopefully our viewers, I keep wanting to say readers because I've been writing for my whole life and this is all very new. Hopefully our viewers have learned something about Star Trek, have found some new stuff to check out. And thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was a delight.
And enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
You too.